My name is Daniel, and I'm 37 years old now. From the outside, my life used to look exactly the way it was supposed to. 10 years ago, I was 27. I had a steady job that paid the bills and left just enough room to breathe. I lived in a clean apartment in a quiet neighborhood. That I was engaged to someone kind, loyal, and deeply committed to me. People call me lucky all the time. My parents were proud. That my friends were jealous. Coworkers told me I had everything figured out. And I learned very early how to nod, smile, and agree. What none of them saw was how heavy my life felt when I was alone. Not dramatic, not painful in a way you can point to, just heavy. Every morning, I woke up with the same quiet thought. Is this really it? I wasn't unhappy enough to leave, but I wasn't happy enough to stay. And that gray space is where most of my regret was born. When we got engaged, everyone said it was the natural next step. We had been together for years, that we shared routines, that we knew each other's coffee orders. We had inside jokes that no one else understood. On paper, we were perfect, but love never felt the way I thought it was supposed to feel. I cared deeply about them, that I respected them, that I trusted them. But something was missing, and I didn't know how to explain that without sounding ungrateful. They loved me with certainty. I loved them with hesitation. And instead of questioning that difference, I buried it. I told myself that real love wasn't supposed to feel intense. That passion faded for everyone. That what mattered was stability, loyalty, shared goals. That's what adults chose. That's what responsible people did. So when doubt crept in, I treated it like a weakness. I didn't talk about it. I didn't explore it. I didn't let myself imagine another life. I just pushed it down and called it maturity. There were small moments that should have warned me. Standing in a store, looking at wedding invitations, and feeling strangely disconnected, like I was shopping for someone else's life. Listening to them talk about our future, and noticing I stayed silent whenever they used the word forever. Lying awake next to them at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why commitment felt more like obligation than choice. But every time that voice appeared, another voice answered louder. You're being selfish, you're overthinking, that don't ruin something good. So I didn't. I stayed. I became very good at playing my role. I laughed at the right moments, and I showed up to family dinners, that I helped plan a wedding I wasn't emotionally present for. I told people I was excited. And the scariest part? After a while, I almost believed it myself. Sometimes, I would catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and feel like I was watching a stranger perform my life. Someone responsible, someone dependable, someone doing everything right. But behind that image was a quiet, growing fear. What if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, and I won't realize it until it's too late? I didn't know how to answer that question, so I stopped asking it. Looking back now, at 37, I understand something I didn't then. The problem wasn't that I didn't love them enough. The problem was that I wasn't honest, with them, or with myself. And that dishonesty laid the foundation for everything that came after. Because when you ignore the truth long enough, it doesn't disappear. It waits. The night everything changed didn't begin with drama. There was no shouting, and slammed doors, that final, unforgettable sentence. It began the way many endings do, quietly. We were sitting in the living room, the TV on but muted, both of us scrolling on our phones. The room felt heavy, like the air had stopped moving. They asked me a simple question, something about the wedding. The guest list, that a small decision that shouldn't have mattered. And I felt it again, that familiar pressure in my chest. That sense that I was being slowly pushed into a life I wasn't sure I wanted. I answered too sharply. They noticed. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. They told me I'd been distant lately, that I seemed somewhere else, even when I was right there. They weren't accusing me. They were trying to understand. And that somehow made it harder. Because I didn't know how to explain something I barely understood myself. So instead of telling the truth, I did what I had been doing for years. I deflected, that I minimized, that I shut down. The conversation ended the way it always did, unresolved. And that was the moment I stood up, grabbed my keys, and said I needed to go for a drive. The night air felt cold and sharp against my skin. I remember sitting in the car for a moment before turning the engine on, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I told myself I just needed space. A few minutes, a clear head. I didn't have a destination. I drove past streets I knew, then streets I didn't. Traffic lights blurred together. Music played softly in the background, but I couldn't tell you what song it was. My mind kept looping the same thought. This isn't how it's supposed to feel. That's when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen stopped me. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone from a different version of my life, before routines, before plans, before expectations. Seeing that name felt like a crack in a wall I'd spent years building. I answered. At first, the conversation was harmless. Small talk, updates, laughing about things that didn't matter anymore. They asked how I was doing. And for once, I didn't know how to lie. I told them I was tired. They understood what I meant, even though I didn't explain it. That's how it had always been between us. I pulled into a parking lot without realizing it. The engine kept running. We talked longer than we should have. About the past, about what could have been, about choices we made when we were younger and braver. They didn't ask me to come see them. I didn't ask either. But somehow we both knew. Meeting them felt surreal, like stepping into a memory that still knew my name. We talked out, we walked. Time moved in a strange, weightless way. There was no grand moment where I decided to cross the line. It happened quietly, the way most betrayals do. One step, then another, until I was already somewhere I had promised myself I would never be. After it was over, I sat alone in my car. The night was silent. No rush. Oh thrill. Just a deep, sinking feeling in my stomach. I stared at the dashboard clock, watching the minutes pass, knowing that with every second, the life I had been building was becoming something else. Something dishonest. Driving home, I rehearsed what I would say. Not a confession, an explanation, a version of the truth that left out the worst parts. I told myself it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that I could bury it and move on. I believed that, or at least I needed to, because admitting what I had done would mean admitting that I had been lying long before that night. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the lights were on. They were waiting for me. And as I turned off the engine, one thought settled heavily in my mind. Nothing will ever be the same again. I just didn't realize yet how long that night would follow me. When I walked through the door, everything looked normal. Too normal. The lights were on. The apartment smelled like dinner, and my fiancé was sitting on the couch, knees pulled up, phone in hand. They looked up and smiled. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I could still turn back. I could tell the truth, that I could end it right there, that I could let the damage happen all at once. But instead, I chose the slower kind of destruction. They asked me where I'd been. Not aggressively, and not suspiciously. Just curious. Concerned. I felt my heart beating in my throat, but my face stayed calm. I said I needed air, that I said I went for a long drive, that I said I wasn't thinking straight. All of it was technically true, just incomplete. They nodded. They accepted it. And something inside me shifted. I expected guilt to explode inside my chest, to knock the breath out of me. But what I felt instead was relief. And that scared me more than the lie itself. Because relief meant I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. That night, I lay in bed next to them, staring into the dark. They fell asleep quickly. I didn't. I replayed the evening over and over, searching for a version of events where I hadn't ruined everything. I promised myself it would never happen again. I promised myself I'd forget it. I promised myself this secret would die with me. The next day, life continued. Emails, meetings, chores. The world didn't stop. No lightning struck, and no punishment came. And slowly, dangerously, that night started to feel unreal, like something that happened to someone else. But secrets have a way of demanding attention. Every time they kissed me goodbye, I felt it. Every time they laughed at something I said, I felt it. Every time they trusted me, the lie grew heavier. There were moments when I almost confessed, standing in the kitchen, watching them cook, sitting in the car together, the radio playing softly. Late at night, when the quiet felt unbearable, the words would rise in my throat, and then fear would swallow them whole. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being the villain in someone else's story. Fear of facing what my actions said about who I really was. So I stayed silent. Weeks passed, then months, and something unexpected happened. The lie settled in. It became part of the routine. I learned how to live around it. I learned which thoughts to avoid, which memories to suppress, which questions to answer vaguely. I learned how to be careful. We started planning the wedding in earnest. Venues, guest lists, seating charts. People congratulated us everywhere we went. They told me how lucky I was. And every time, I smiled and said thank you, because correcting them would mean opening a door I was too afraid to walk through. At night, I would imagine two futures, one where I confessed, where everything fell apart quickly and painfully, and one where I stayed quiet, where life continued, stable and intact, just slightly poisoned. I chose the second one, not because it was right, but because it was easier. The day we got married, I felt like I was watching myself from a distance. I stood at the altar, I said the words, I made the promises, and every vow felt heavier than the last. When I said honest, my throat tightened. When I said faithful, my mind went silent. People applauded. They cried. They told us it was beautiful. And I told myself that maybe love could still grow on top of a lie. Years passed. The secret didn't disappear. It matured. It changed the way I loved, the way I trusted, the way I saw myself. I became careful with my happiness, as if I didn't fully deserve it. I became guarded with my words, afraid that the wrong sentence might crack everything open. Sometimes I would catch myself thinking, if they never find out, did it really matter? And then guilt would answer, it mattered the moment you chose silence over truth. I'm 37 now, and I still carry that night with me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just constantly. The lie didn't destroy my life. It reshaped it, quietly, and I don't know which outcome is worse. People often imagine consequences as something loud. A confrontation, a confession, a door slamming shut. That wasn't my experience. My consequences arrived quietly, woven into the ordinary days that followed. Life moved on. We settled in a marriage the way most couples do, slowly, naturally, without ceremony. Morning routines, shared groceries, inside jokes that returned again and again. From the outside, nothing was wrong. From the inside, everything felt slightly off. The first thing that changed was the way I experienced happiness. Good moments came, promotions, vacations, anniversaries. But joy always felt muted, as if I was standing behind a glass wall, watching my own life happen without fully stepping into it. Whenever something good happened, a quiet voice would remind me, you don't fully deserve this. And once that thought takes root, it's hard to feel innocent again. Trust became complicated. They trusted me completely, and that trust felt heavier than suspicion ever could. Every time they defended me, every time they spoke about me with pride, I felt the weight of the lies settle deeper. I began to realize something unsettling. Guilt doesn't fade with time. It adapts. I became more careful, not with my actions, with my words. I learned how to avoid certain topics, how to redirect conversations, how to keep parts of myself sealed off. I wasn't hiding what I'd done. I was hiding who I had become because of it. Years passed. The memory of that night grew distant, but its presence never disappeared. It surfaced in quiet moments, long drives, sleepless nights, the spaces between conversations. Sometimes I would look at my spouse and wonder, if they knew the truth, would they still love me? Or would they realize they never really knew me at all? That question followed me everywhere. Intimacy changed. Not physically, emotionally. There's always a part of me that stayed guarded, as if complete closeness might expose something I couldn't take back. I love them, in my own way. But love, built on silence, has limits. And I felt those limits every day. There were moments when I considered telling the truth. Not out of courage, out of exhaustion. Carrying a secret for years reshapes your inner world. It makes honesty feel dangerous and silence feel safe. I would rehearse the conversation in my head. Imagine their reaction, the pain, the disbelief. And then imagine the life that would follow. A life without them. And I would stop. I told myself I was protecting them. Protecting our marriage. Protecting our stability. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was protecting myself. The longer I stayed silent, the harder the truth became to speak. The lie aged. It gained history. It intertwined itself with everything we had built. Confessing now wouldn't just reveal one mistake. It would rewrite our entire story. Sometimes, I wondered if everyone was living like this. If adulthood was simply learning to coexist with regret. If marriage was about choosing which truths to leave unsaid. Those thoughts comforted me, until they didn't. Now, 10 years later, I see my life clearly. Stable, respectable, quietly heavy. Nothing collapsed. Nothing exploded. But something essential was lost. Not love. Integrity. And without it, even the best life can feel incomplete. I often think about how easily everything could have gone differently. Not because of that night, but because of every moment after. Every time I chose comfort over honesty. Those were the real consequences. And they're the ones I still live with. I've spent years thinking about what a confession is supposed to look like. I imagine dramatic moments, tears, anger, doors closing for the last time. But the truth is quieter than that. A confession doesn't always come from courage. Sometimes it comes from exhaustion. I'm 37 now. I wake up earlier than I used to. My life is organized, predictable. From the outside, it looks peaceful. But inside, there's a constant, low-level tension. The kind you get used to until you forget what calm ever felt like. I don't replay that night anymore. I replay the years after. All the moments when honesty was possible and silence felt easier. I've asked myself 1,000 times why I never told the truth. And the answer keeps changing. Sometimes I tell myself I was protecting them. Sometimes I say I was protecting our life. Sometimes I admit I was afraid. But fear wears many disguises. It can look like love. It can look like responsibility. It can even look like kindness. The hardest part isn't the guilt. It's the distance. Knowing that the person who loves me the most doesn't fully know me at all. That there's a version of myself I've kept hidden. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's dishonest. That kind of distance doesn't scream. It whispers. Every day, there are moments when I almost speak. Late at night, the room quiet, the world paused. I'll look at them and think, if I tell the truth now, maybe we can still rebuild something real. And then another thought follows. Or maybe I'll destroy the only life I know. And I stay silent. Again, this confession isn't something I'm ready to give them. Not yet. Maybe never. But it's something I need to give myself. To admit that silence has a cost. That avoiding pain doesn't erase it. It just spreads it out over years. If you're listening to this, maybe you're carrying a secret of your own. Something you told yourself didn't matter. Something you thought time would bury. It doesn't. It waits. And it becomes part of who you are. I don't know what the right ending to this story is. A confession. A divorce. Forgiveness. Or lifelong silence. What I know is this. Truth doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. And peace built on a lie is fragile, even when it looks strong. This is my confession. Not to them. To myself. And maybe to you. Thank you for listening.